Anti-Mage and Isekai LitRPG Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, audiobook by Kevin Chapter 11. A test of leadership. More blue boxes unfolded in Nathan's vision, and he glanced over his class choices. Just 3. I suppose I haven't had a lot of time to do stuff to unlock others, but at least the one I've been guided towards for the last few days is there. Potential classes. Assassin of Gemor. You have been trained in the tradition of the assassins of Gemor and slain their enemies. This class will enhance your stealth abilities and enable you to blend into a hostile environment. It may further develop into classes specialized for infiltration or the assassination of mages. Bonebreaker Assassin. You assassinate with your bare hands, leaving fear in your wake as you rip flesh and crush bones. This class will make your unarmed attacks more deadly and will make you more terrifying to your targets. It may further develop into classes focused on bare-handed attacks or spreading fear among your foes. Shadowed Stalker. You move through shadows and kill in darkness when your prey is alone and defenseless. This class will make your attacks disorient your foes, as well as enhance your ability to move quickly and unseen in darkness. It may further develop into classes focused on spreading darkness around you or becoming intangible in shadows. Shadowed Stalker is right out. Every single mage from here to Gemor can summon light. I'm a bit interested in the terror element of Bonebreaker Assassin. But if I ever want to go to the city of Giant's Rest, I need those disguise abilities. I can't always depend on Phaeline for infiltration. Congratulations, you are now an assassin of Gemor. 2 of your existing class skills have developed, and you have unlocked 3 new class skills. These skills are tied to your parent class, and their power will increase with your level in that class. Davrar applauds your choice and hopes you will continue to survive and prosper. Class skill focus has become regenerative focus. Your focus will rapidly regenerate when you are not very distracted. It can be spent to enhance your attention and improve your control, or on other skills or talents that utilize focus. Class skill vital targeting has become catastrophic blows. You will be better able to identify the weak points of your foes, and your strikes against those areas are more likely to inflict lethal damage. Injuries inflicted with your bare hands will resist healing magic. Class skill stealthy movement. Your movements will be harder to notice. This effect can be enhanced by spending focus. New class skill infiltration. You will be able to blend into hostile environments easily and will not seem out of place even in imperfect disguises. New class skill forgettable. Foes will forget details about you after you leave their attention. This is a mental effect that can be resisted by someone with the appropriate skill or sufficient willpower. New class skill Unsuspecting Strike. Your strikes against unaware targets will more easily bypass armor and other protections. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 36. Excellent. Infiltration and Forgettable will be invaluable later. Nathan left the small room, carefully opening the door and glancing over towards the other room. Phaeline was just leaving the room she'd entered, and she raised an eyebrow at Nathan. He nodded deeply so she could see in the semi-darkness. A satisfied smile spread across his face. The leader of the assassins of Gemor gave him a congratulatory salute, then gestured to the room of dozing slave elites before them. Right. Time to get to work. I'll need to be quick. Nathan extended his senses towards the nearest sleeping fighter, getting a feel for the enchantments binding the man's mind. He mapped out the magic around the head of the scarred warrior, noting the lack of a collar. The mental magic was set into the man's skull and felt like it had been there for many years. The control magic was too complicated for Nathan to figure out easily, but that wasn't what he was looking for. He was looking for the self-destructs, the booby traps that Giant's Rest had the habit of leaving in people's brains. The trick was picking them out of the rest of the complicated mind control spell, and Nathan spent several minutes staring at the man's forehead as he traced mana patterns with magical perception. High tier Identify 9 achieved. He found 2 traps. The first was fairly straightforward if the rest of the spell failed, then the elite's brain got cooked. I think I got lucky those earlier elites didn't die when this went off. It helped that I was in close proximity and give them the full blast of my aura. Not sure I can do that here. The second one was more subtle and blended into the rest of the control apparatus. If somebody started tampering with the spell, then the second portion of the spell would activate and subtly change something about the man's brain. No idea what that does. Could knock them out. Might drive them into a murderous rampage. Might just confuse them really badly. Regardless, if it's a failsafe, I don't want it activating. I wonder if that activated with the elites earlier. Nathan ignored Phelan's impatient look, moving on to another sleeping fighter. He only spent a minute verifying the spell was the same before quickly scanning a third. This one he only gave a cursory glance before nodding to himself. He spent a moment practicing what he was about to do on empty air before he rolled his shoulders and gestured that it was time. Then Nathan walked back through the barracks, stretching out his anti-magic and shredding the control spells from every elite he passed. He was perfectly centered, burning through his remaining focus to let him dispel the magic fast, and spending stamina to move quickly across the room. He prioritized speed and getting the anti-magic right over being completely silent. Burning out the mind magic might also wake them up after all. Aura of Anti-Magic 4 achieved. The split attention cost him. About halfway across the room, Nathan kicked a helmet. It rolled and clattered on the stone floor. He sped up. Behind him there were noises of confusion. Somebody gasped, but Nathan ignored it, unwinding the spells from 3 more elite fighters. The noise reached a critical mass and all of the slave elites started to wake up. 4 of them hadn't been purged of the mind magic, and they grabbed their weapons and rolled to their feet, looking around with murderous focus. I'm so close, just these last few. Nathan activated his rage and jumped at one of them, spreading his aura to encompass 2 more. The elite interposed his sword, and it slid into Nathan's chest with very little resistance. The man growled and braced to wrench the weapon out sideways, when Nathan finished disarming the failsafes and purged him of mind magic. Suddenly nerveless fingers released the blood-soaked hilt. Nathan yanked the sword out of his lungs himself and turned to face the last elite, who had just donned a pair of massive spiked gauntlets. The elite swung with all the grace of an oncoming steam engine, and Nathan ducked the blow only to find it coming at his face from a different angle due to some skill or talent. Nathan slammed himself to the ground with his mobility skills, a small amount of blood spurting out of the mostly healed chest wound. He reached out to yank on the man's ankle but found it immovable. The elite landed on Nathan's chest elbow first, breaking several ribs. He twisted, and Nathan's arms were pinned in place. The elite was clearly an expert grappler, stronger than Nathan even with his rage. In seconds, he was outmaneuvered and pinned, but Nathan hadn't been trying to win the grapple. He'd been breaking the mind control spell. As soon as the magic was gone, the man abandoned his grip and pressed his armored palms to his eyes from his crouched position. Nathan rolled to his feet, looking up to see every pair of eyes in the room focused on him. He saw confusion, anger, and dull listlessness. But a few faces held hope, and it was to those that Nathan spoke, pitching his voice to carry across the large room. You are not tools anymore. You are free of the mind magic of Giant's Rest, free to make your own decisions. What is your purpose? What will you do with your freedom? Nathan paused, then reached down to grab the arm of the gauntleted elite, whose eyes shone with sudden fire. He pulled the brawler up to his feet. Punish Giant's Rest for stealing your life. Join me in fighting them to carve out a life free of their magics. You are people, not slaves. A voice spoke from nearby, rusty from long disuse. Loyalty to the giant. The speaker had picked up the sword already covered in Nathan's blood, and he swung it at Nathan's neck. No. The attack was intercepted by a thick gauntlet, and the elite Nathan had just lifted to his feet, snarled, and yanked on the sword, swinging his other fist in a brutal strike. The swordsman ducked the punch, but the heavy blow blurred and caught the swordsman in the side of the head regardless. Bone cracked and the body dropped with a crushed skull. The hulking man turned to Nathan. His voice was deep and rough. "Death to the giant and those who raise it up." Nathan looked into the massive man's eyes, which had started glowing like windows into a forge. "I'm Nathan. What's your name?" The vestige of a smile appeared on the craggy face. "Olad." They turned together to the rest of the frozen elites, and Nathan raised his voice again. "I killed Archmage Tldho Droxal and broke his magics. Adventurers of Gemor are coming to free Halsmit from Giant's Rest. We will kill Exia. Fight with me, and you will live free or die free." There was a flicker of motion, and one of the elites hurled a javelin at Nathan's head. He'd seen the movement and already started to dodge before the weapon was even released. The spear blasted forward like it had been fired from a cannon. It tore off Nathan's left ear and flew onwards to hit the back wall with the sound of shattering stone. High-tier dodging footwork 8 achieved. The spear thrower was swarmed by 2 other elites, blades striking lethal blows in instants. "Freedom or death," Oled cried, and it spread through the room. More fights broke out, but those who refused to yell were outnumbered and killed in moments. Nathan joined the chant, and many of the elites who'd been listless and confused seemed to shake themselves awake at the noise, taking up the chant. All of the slave elites were looking around, smiling grimly at each other and making sure everybody was yelling right along with them. The room filled with energy, like a crowd before a riot. "Congratulations! You have developed the high-tier earnestness 10 utility skill into leadership." Utility skill. Leadership. You have used honest conviction to rally the confused and angry to your cause. This skill will help portray the intense conviction you have in your purpose and encourage people to follow your example. In addition, people will look to you as a leader, and this skill will help you encourage, reassure, and coordinate those who align themselves with you. The double doors at the far end of the room opened, and a single war mage burst into the room, flanked by 2 more slave elites. All eyes turned towards him, and the mage's hands came up into a casting position. Phaline melted out of the shadows behind him and threw something at his back. It was a magical explosive, like the one that Simla had used against Nathan in their duel. It exploded with an enormous crack, sending a shockwave through the large room. The slave elites standing next to the mage were thrown off their feet, but the mage himself only stumbled forward, quickly recovering his footing. His mage armor didn't even break, though it did crack slightly. 8 elites attacked him in less than a second. A 2-handed mace slammed into the spell, widening the cracks before an enchanted sword stabbed into the barely visible opening and pried. The magical armor broke with a burst of force, tossing away everybody nearby. The mage ignored these interruptions and summoned a spell that gathered fire mana like a whirlpool. Immolating, an arrow hit him in the temple, splashing blood across the doorway. The mage dropped bonelessly and the mana dissipated, raising the temperature in the room 20 degrees. All of the violence happened in eerie silence, without any yells or screams from any of the participants. Then one voice rose. "Mage Breaker, come aid my brother." Nathan moved towards the voice, finding that one of the 2 elites who'd come in with the mage still lived. The other had been slain where he'd fallen, but a freed elite knelt atop the other, struggling to hold him down. His weapon had been kicked away, but the slave elite struggled to gouge at the man holding him down. Already the failsafe on the mental enchantment was starting to activate as the man realized he was captured. Kneeling down, Nathan broke the enchantment on the struggling elite before it could do any permanent harm. The newly freed elite froze for a moment before realization slowly dawned in his eyes. He reached up, gently embracing the man pinning him down. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 160. You have survived fighting several slave elites in the process of freeing them. Oled's voice rang through the room. Armor up! He suited actions to words, and the elites busied themselves with putting on the armor that had been lying next to them. Phelan came to stand next to Nathan. She looked out across the room, surveying 36 elites armoring themselves to fight against their former masters. This changes everything. Win or lose, Giant's Rest will never be the same once it's known we can turn their most powerful slaves against them. Yup, seems like their own actions coming home to roost. Nathan eyed Phelan for a moment before snapping his fingers. I need to go get Stella and make sure she doesn't get killed by these folks. He stepped through the crowd towards the back room, feeling the eyes of the elites on him once more. Oled met his eyes. They name you Mage Breaker. I never expected. He shook his head, looking around the room. A chance. Nathan clapped the hulking man on the back as he passed. I'll be right back with a mage. She's from Gemor, not Giant's Rest, an ally. Then we free Housemate. Nathan ducked into the back room and quickly excavated a path through the weaving equipment, careless of the noise. After a moment, he reached the hole in the wall and stuck his head past the fabric that still blocked it. Stella was outside, leaning against the wall and chewing her lip viciously. She had been watching the hole impatiently, not even giving Nathan a chance to open his mouth before speaking. What occurs? Hear me, but waiting like this is tense. The shouting sounded good. A smile spread across Nathan's face. Yeah, send the message and come on in. Might want to make sure you don't look like a Giant's Rest mage for now. I think they're a bit jumpy about that. Nathan returned to the large room where the freed elites seemed to have realized they could talk to each other. Slow conversations had broken out across the room. Giant's ballsack, I hate this helmet, one of the men groused. Can't fucking breathe. Another spoke up, a broad grin splitting his weathered face. Then don't wear it, you don't have to. Phelan had been striding among the elites, a massive smile on her face as she eyed them each up and down. But she responded sharply to the dialogue. If you wish to be paralyzed and dominated, then skip the helmet. But if you want to hunt mages through the city, then leave it on. If you act as if you were still a slave, then you can approach to kill. A few growls met her words, and the man who'd first complained looked down at his helmet, jaw firming as he prepared to put it on. Nathan spoke up. We're going to split up. Those who want to pretend to still be slaves can go hunting for mages, but I'm leading a group to the main gates into the inner city. We'll meet up with some Gemor adventurers there, then move to Xia's mansion. Our priority is going to be speed, not stealth. If you don't want to wear the helmets, you can come with me. He turned to Stella, who just emerged from the back room wearing her Gemor adventurer robes. They were a similar color to the Giant's Rest mage robes, but the embroidery and cut were a very different style. There's a third option, Nathan continued. If you don't wish to fight, stay here. I freed you from enslavement as soldiers. I won't demand you fight for me now. Nobody deserves enslavement, and you do not owe me a debt. I have fixed a problem with the world. You can go to Gemor if you want, or elsewhere. Gemor needs competent fighters to keep the villages safe from monsters, if you don't want to face the mind magic of Giant's Rest ever again. A snort came from the side, and Oled slammed his gauntleted fists together with a crash of metal. He was fully armored now, and the heavy metal plate made him look like an ogre. I have 20 years of blood in my eyes. A future in Gemor is a blasphemous hope. We will follow you to a free housemate first. Firming his jaw, Nathan nodded. Thanks, Olad, but everybody makes their own decision. The elites were segregating themselves into two groups, with some putting on the helmets and others casting them into a pile in the center of the room. Nathan addressed the group of 15 or so who'd put their face-covering helmets back on. You should probably head out now. We'll give you a bit of a head start. Good luck, cause chaos. If everything goes to shit, get out of Housemit and head west. Gemor will take you in." The masked fighters clasped their hands together in a giant's rest salute, then left via the front door. Some were alone, some were in small groups, but they all bore a grim air. I don't know that they expect to live through this. Nathan turned to the 20 elites who hadn't donned helmets. They buzzed with energy, their faces reflecting a variety of extreme emotions from anger to hope. "When we get the signal that our allies are through the outer gates, we'll head to the inner gates, meet them there. Then we go for Xia's mansion. Sounds good." One of the fighters spoke, his voice surprisingly high. "Other slave soldiers, do we kill or capture? Can you keep breaking the mind magic? What about collars?" A smile spread across Nathan's face. "I can break any magic we find. Collars, mind magic, gates, all of it. Any slaves you capture I can free. Hail the giant." Oled seemed to realize what he just said and shook his head. "Can you teach the inside of your magic in that time?" The comment was clearly meant as a joke. Stella raised her hand, signaling that she'd received a message. "They've taken the outer. Not all the teams are at the walls yet, but they're close. We have 3 teams coming into the city. That's maybe 15 adventurers. And the giant traders among them." Nathan turned towards the door into the square. "Let's roll." Chapter 12. Boone reunions. For the first time, Nathan strode the streets of Housemit without a disguise. He burst into the plaza at the head of 20 recently freed slave elites, men who'd been trained as deadly fighters their entire lives. They'd been dedicated to killing the enemies of Giant's Rest and protecting the graduates of the Ascendant Academy with their very lives. Some had chosen to hold firm to that purpose, and they'd been cut down by their fellows after the mind magic that compelled obedience was purged. All of those who accompanied Nathan had chosen to fight their previous masters, and they ran through the city without much regard for stealth. Stella was in the center, and the elites had automatically fallen into a protective formation around her. Phelan faded from notice as they left the building, and Nathan was pretty sure she was tailing them. "I don't think I need her help at this point. Having an ace up our sleeves is probably more valuable than a single extra combatant right now. I also can't tell her what to do, leadership be damned. She's above me in the adventurer hierarchy." They were running through the streets headed for the main gate into the inner city when Nathan heard regimented feet marching around the next corner. More telling were the traces of a detection spell radiating out from the oncoming patrol. He slowed down and called out to the elites, keeping his voice low but clear. "Patrol around the next corner. I'll go for the mages. Stella's on magical defense. Don't die, the adventurers we're linking up with will have healing." The elites had already begun reacting to the presence of the patrol, and they responded to Nathan's instructions with alacrity, stacking up at the corner. Oled gestured Nathan to the front, where he waited for the radius of the detection spell to approach. Right before it swept over the group, Nathan kindled his rage and knifed his hand forward to signal the attack. The group burst out from the corner, feet hammering on the cobbled streets. Nathan was used to being superhumanly fast over short distances. He'd picked up so many boosts to his speed that he could probably beat a cheetah from a standing start. To his surprise, several of the freed elites kept up with him, and they plowed into the block of soldiers only seconds after rounding the corner. Well, the elites plowed into the soldiers. Nathan jumped over the line of shields and flew towards the mages. There were 3 of them, clustered within the formation of 50 enslaved fighters. Nathan realized his jump had been overly enthusiastic, and he was set to fly entirely over the mages and collide with the far side of the formation. But he had a solution: strenuous agility and slow fall. Let him adjust his path towards the leftmost mage. The man wore the robes of an enslavement mage, and his eyes widened comically. He didn't manage to get a spell off before Nathan's feet impacted his chest, blowing through his mage armor as if it wasn't even there. Ribs shattered, and Nathan rolled away from the uneven footing. As soon as his feet were underneath him again, he sprang into the air and kicked off a slave soldier to fly towards the second mage like a murderous bouncy ball. The robed figures had enough time to bring their hands up, both firing off spells. Rock Orb Fireball. The rock ball was targeted at Nathan, and the mage probably expected it to send him spinning away. But Nathan reached out with his aura, and the ball of conjured stone dissolved like a snowball thrown into a blast furnace. His magical senses tracked the fireball as it flew towards the freed elites, and Nathan winced. The spell was outside the range of his aura. He just had to hope it wouldn't kill many of his allies. But Stella had been watching, and the offensive spell ran into a plane of force and detonated overhead. The noise and pressure waves staggered some of the elites, but none were seriously hurt, maybe beyond some hearing damage. Nathan ensured there wouldn't be a follow-up by caving in the second mage's skull with a punch before turning on the last one. The man danced away, putting more soldiers in between him and Nathan. Then an arrow with the force of a bullet bounced off his mage armor, and the mage stumbled. The slave soldiers tried to close ranks, but Nathan ignored their spears and slipped past their shields to run after the fleeing mage. More slave soldiers tried to block his path, but the elites had penetrated the formation, and Oled slammed two of them aside to clear the path. The mage looked around frantically, then rapidly summoned the mana to cast one last spell. Blink. Nathan had felt the magic coming together and lashed out with his anti-magic aura to break mage armor and sever much of the spell work. The blink spell still triggered, but only the top half of the man teleported down the street. Two legs and some viscera slumped to the cobblestones where he'd been standing. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 38. You have slain the Giant's Rest mages Rebred Dho Yivit, Tala Dha Voman, and Bref Dho Varmer. After that was the cleanup of a perfect fight. Nathan and Stella had taken care of the mages, and the elites so thoroughly outclassed the regular slave soldiers that they'd taken few injuries and captured most of their enemies. Nathan immediately set about scrubbing mental magic and tearing collars off the fallen, wary of the lethal manner in which the enchantments would react to capture. It only took a minute to get them all, and he surveyed the field of dazed soldiers. Some of them bore injuries, but others had just been hurled to the ground. "We're going to kick Giant's Rest out of Housemint," Nathan declared to the bruised and bewildered soldiers. "You can join us, hide, or cause trouble, but abandon any loyalty to Giant's Rest, because they treated you as a tool to be cast aside. Join us, and make yourself a space to be your own people." After all, the normal slave soldiers were artisans who didn't pick up skills quickly enough or made too many mistakes, or just pissed off their masters. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 164. You have defeated a Giant's Rest patrol and freed many of their slave soldiers. As Nathan turned to go, the pulse of the detection enchantment washed over them. It adhered to everybody around him, sensing their lack of mental magic or a mage mark. Nathan watched with curiosity and faint horror as the spell sunk into Oled's skin. It didn't do anything except emit a faint magical ping, signaling the city-wide enchantment with an intangible beacon, the control of which is in Ixia's mansion. Well, that also probably marked the adventurers and all of the slaves I freed earlier. I hope we can keep Giant's Rest busy enough that they aren't hunted down. Frowning, Nathan reached out with his aura and absorbed the magic on Oled. It had no failsafes, no layers, just the simple tracking spell. He spread his aura wide and strode through the crowd, deactivating the tracker on everybody he passed. Just as Nathan finished clearing the spell from everybody affected, Feline stepped into visibility. She looked peeved and held up the dead mage mark. Nathan gave her a smirk and stripped the enchantment that had tagged her. It probably still told them there are a bunch of us here, but it won't give them live updates anymore. Regardless, we might have lost the advantage of surprise. "Elites with me," Everybody else hide or join up, Nathan cried out before taking off. He set a fast pace, wanting to get to the gate before the Gemor adventurers. Several of the soldiers staggered after him, but they couldn't keep pace. Two managed by tossing aside their shields and sprinting along clutching just a spear. But they weren't going to be in shape to fight at the end of the run. Speed is more important than a couple of weaker fighters. If they scatter, it's only going to confuse the mages controlling the detection enchantment when the next ping goes out. Stella managed to keep up with Nathan, and the elites just fine, after all. She'd been doing the heir's daily run for years. Her class didn't give her any physical enhancements like Nathan or the elites, but she'd figured out force spells that let her keep up regardless. She wasn't even out of breath a few minutes later. "The adventurers are almost at the inner gate," she relayed. Nathan snarled, running faster. "So are we. There's only one mage on this side of the wall. Take them, I'm going up the wall for the one on top. I don't want the adventurers to have to charge the other side without support." They burst around the corner in a gaggle, and the same gate Nathan and Stella had used to enter the inner city was before them once again. The guards were the same as before, with one mage on this side of the wall, but Nathan knew there was at least one enforcement mage at the top, with two more on the other side. The artisan mage shouted in alarm as Nathan and the elites charged. She cast a spell that caused a long horn blast, and the soldiers on either side of her leveled their spears. Then Stella hit the yellow-robed mage with a bolt of lightning. It didn't break her mage armor, but it also didn't stop. The woman cowered and threw her arms out, frantically trying to defend herself from the writhing beam of electricity by recasting mage armor over and over. That's a fight Stella will win easily, and quickly. Atop the gatehouse, bow-wielding soldiers fired down, but they were more of an annoyance than a true threat to Nathan and the elites. Of greater note was the graying enforcement mage standing directly above the gate. He looked down on the charging elites with displeasure, but without a trace of concern. An arrow struck his mage armor with the force of a ballista bolt and bounced off, not even rocking him back. The Giant's Rest mage gave one sharp nod, as if he decided the most economical solution to a minor issue he faced. Maximized blast fireball, the ball of flame that flew from his hand radiated danger. If Stella's fireballs were grenades, this thing was an artillery shell. Nathan leapt for it, jumping up and reaching his hand toward the fireball as it arced towards the crowd of elites behind him. He caught it like an outfielder catching a baseball as it soared over the fence. The magic fizzed angrily against Nathan's palm as it dissipated. "It's a good thing I have a lot of experience with fireballs, or else that thing would have blown a crater in the street." The enforcement mage's bushy eyebrows shot up, and his jaw dropped. His expression grew even more baffled as Nathan jumped over the line of soldiers defending the gate and climbed the wall, slamming handholds into the mortar between the stones with his bare hands. Nathan could understand why the man was confused. This wall was enchanted. It contained powerful magic that made it impossible to climb and very difficult to damage. He couldn't destroy the enchantment as a whole. It was too large, cemented deeply within the thick stone. But he could prevent it from having any effect in the area around him, and the mortar was surprisingly fragile without magic holding it together. Disintegrate the spell splashed over Nathan without effect, and finally the old enforcement mage's confusion transformed into fear. He remained at the edge of the parapet, looking down at Nathan like somebody in a horror movie, frozen and unable to run as the monster bore down on them. Nathan reached through the mage armor, like it was plastic wrap, and grabbed the old man by the throat. He squeezed his fist and yanked the mage off the wall, casting him towards the fight below, where the elites were handily winning against the badly trained soldiers. The man might have temporarily survived the crushed throat and 40-foot fall, but he definitely didn't survive being struck by 3 different elites over the next few seconds. The archers to either side pulled short swords and moved to attack Nathan, but he lashed out with his aura, sloppily crushing the mental magic on most of them before leaping off the other side of the wall. The Giants' Rest forces on this side had their own problems. They'd been trading ranged attacks with adventurers taking cover further down the street. Nathan spotted the glowing gold of Kachai's divine mana. He heard the sharp crack of Sarah's rifle, which was answered by a fireball that detonated against a golden shield. The stalemate ended when Nathan landed on top of one of the 2 mages, dispatching the other with a quick series of punches. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 40. You have slain the Giants' Rest mages Lave Dha Hummel, Bran Dho Yivit, and Audra Dho Halded. The slave soldiers around Nathan slowly turned their spears towards him, but he was already among them, ripping off collars and dispelling the magic as he tore through their ranks. But there were 100 of them, and only one of him. The crush of bodies hemmed Nathan in, and even though most of the soldiers weren't even trying to capture him anymore, he was trapped. At least until a voice Nathan hadn't heard in some time gave a wordless bellow of rage. Hooves clattered across stone, and an entire rank of soldiers went flying as Arthur laid into them with his enormous staff, knocking soldiers to the ground and stunning them for a moment without slaying them outright. More adventurers followed, and the slave soldiers were soon dead or shaking their heads in confusion at the absence of spells demanding their loyalty. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 168. You have captured a gate guarded by many foes and relieved your allies as they attacked the far side. More levels for Implacable Antimage than Assassin of Gemor there. Those weren't really assassinations. The rage melted off Arthur's armored elk centaur body, and he gave a deep laugh as he surveyed Nathan and the 2 dead mages in front of the gate. A dragon indeed. We scarcely believed the message, but we knew you would make no game of this. Nathan clasped hands and traded a grin with Arthur, noting that Egal, Sarah, and Arl all stood close behind. Egal had changed into clothing more reminiscent of an adventurer of Gemor. She looked like she belonged. Then he turned to the other adventurers who'd first come to rescue Nathan and the heirs, and were now joining them to try to free the city. Vihala was the first to approach, and the heavy-set black woman clasped forearms with Nathan. I am free of regret to find you here in this fight. When we first found you, I would not have believed this prophecy. Nathan returned Emerald's nod, knowing that the slight fighter could see him even through their face-covering helmet. They didn't say anything, but that wasn't their way. Man, it's good to see these folks. Even among Gemor adventurers, the giant traders are a bunch of characters. William hustled down the road, the bird folks' beak clacking excitedly. I'd bet Dragon Bones ta stalker teeth we'd be alone common in here. But everybody came. He gestured to the other 2 teams who had hung back. The heavily muscled leader of the first team reached out his hand with a wide smile, and Nathan eagerly shook it. Delric, last saw you a week ago and 100 miles south of here. Delric Ernesto was the leader of the Old Hands, and Nathan was thrilled to see him. He'd backed Nathan against Khazar when the traditionalist adventurer had accused Nathan of leaving his nephew Simla to die. Beyond that, the Old Hands were a respectable team with good close combat abilities, and their mage Netta was an accomplished illusionist. I'm also like 70% sure that she has a crush on Stella, or maybe she's just really envious of Stella's magic. It can be a little hard to tell. The black-skinned man smiled widely. I would give a grand insight to hear this tale, but the fire burns onwards. He relinquished Nathan's hand and stepped back to make room. The leader of the 3rd adventuring team stopped in front of Nathan and bowed at the waist with military precision. Nathan looked up at the green-skinned orc that towered over him, dressed in dark plate that was clearly related to the armor worn by the legionaries of Agman. He was carrying a crossbow that looked more like a small ballista. Damn, he's like 7 feet tall. I've seen Emerald talking to this guy back at the guild, but we've never been introduced. I wonder if he was exiled from Agman like Poppy the Alchemist. Lycas Jareth, in your presence, your name is spoken among the noble Nathan Lark. The orc's handshake was crushing, and when Nathan returned the grip strength for strength, the orc's face lit up and his smile widened to something predatory. Glad you could make it. Anybody who helps me overthrow a city is a friend of mine. Nathan surveyed the 15 or so adventurers. And that's what we're here for. This isn't a rescue. Nathan spread his arms to indicate the slain mages and downed soldiers. We can take this city now, before any reinforcements show up. The giant traders cheered, but Lycast and Delric looked at each other doubtfully. Nathan caught the look and addressed them. I've killed one archmage already, and the other is running scared. The mages are confused and panicked because they can't hurt me. Now I've freed all the slave elites in the city, and they're right on the other side of that gate, waiting for us. Delric considered for a moment, then shrugged. True aim. How do we get the gate open? Seems like the first target. Nathan pressed his hands to the enchanted wood. Well, Giant's Rest depends on magic for everything, and that's a problem I can always solve. With a thought, his aura reached into the gate and shattered the magic holding the doors together. It only took one firm shove to open up the passage. Oled and Stella were on the other side and broke into grins as they saw Nathan and the adventurers. They'd been rooting through a pile of charcoal on the ground that appeared to be all that was left of the Giant's Rest mage who'd engaged Stella in a magical duel. Looks like that wasn't a big challenge for her. He stepped through the gates, and the adventurers followed, trading wary looks and hasty greetings with the elites. Netta gasped and ran over to talk to Stella, but Sarah beat her to it, clasping arms with Stella as she rejoined the heirs. Let's go. We got a city to claim. Nathan started running, and soon enough heard the sounds of 4 adventuring teams and 20 freed Giant's Rest elites following him. Leadership 2 achieved. Chapter 13, Rapid Advance. Nathan set a pace that was fast but not quite the frenetic dash he'd led the freed elites on earlier. Several more soldiers joined them, but a few opted to run and hide in the slums, and more ran for the gates that the heirs and other adventurers had busted open on their way into the city. He led the way, pausing only to drop back and banish the pinging magic that still lingered on some people, and was occasionally reapplied by frantic waves of the detection magic. The streets appeared to be mostly clear, without a trace of further Giant's Rest forces. They passed the destroyed patrol, where some of the freed soldiers they'd left behind called out questions that were answered by the freed elites. Both groups shared laughter that was somewhere between disbelieving and vengeful. More of the soldiers joined them, ditching their shields to keep up with the procession. Arthur galloped up next to him, having absolutely no problems with the pace as his 4 hooves clattered on the stone. Nathan glanced up to the silver-haired man who'd first set him upon the path of rage. How did the outer gate go? Any casualties? Gates fall more easily when attacked from both sides. The big elk man rolled his arms, his thick armored plates grating slightly. To shine light in your eyes, the heirs did the deed. Arl appeared from invisibility atop the gatehouse to bisect a mage, and Sarah cut down the soldiers on guard. From there, it was a conventional fight, and Katja healed all wounds away much as his mother would have. Glad to hear, Egil pulled her weight with the invisibility on Arl. I don't really understand what's going on with her, though I think Sarah is helping her. The Treeborn faced forward, but his tone of pride was clear. The heirs were already set to become dragons, but since you joined them, they have fulfilled that promise. I am glad your path has found you and your teammates have been enriched by your truth. Nathan nodded. Glad to have you join us. Are you ready to conquer Halsmit? The elk centaur's grin split his face wide. Beyond prophecy's sway, Lead us to victory, Nathan Lark. Nathan glanced backwards at the column, finally feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon him. I really am in charge of this, aren't I? When did that happen? Phelan's higher level than I am and higher in the Gemor adventurer hierarchy, but she's nowhere to be seen. Kachai's the nominal leader of the heirs, but I'm the definite leader of this attempt to conquer Housemit. Oled has clearly stepped up as the leader of the freed elites, but he's still following me. All of them are. That leadership skill isn't just for window dressing. People are gonna die, and I'll be responsible for that. Hopefully it's the Giants' Rest mages that die, but I know we're not going to be so lucky. All I can do is make sure to lose as few of my people as possible, but I'm not going to back down from this. I want to win, to start cleansing this cancer from the surface of Davrar. Housemit won't be the end, either. It'll be a good start. He was interrupted from his musing by the presence of a helmetless elite turning the corner ahead of them. The man limped towards them, and it seemed that he'd been badly burned. Nathan slowed and joined Oled to head for the newcomer, gesturing for Kacha to join them. The man started talking in between gasps as soon as they got close. Narun and Bufo went to warn Ixia. She called all the remaining mages to assemble in the square before her mansion. Nathan blinked, looking to the leader of the freed elites for an explanation. Oled's face grew thunderous. By the giant's blood, I swear doom on those fools. He saw Nathan's expression. Two of the elites you freed. They are bodyguards of Ixia, and their loyalty extends to trickery. He clapped the burned elite on the shoulder. Good scouting, Turbang. Well shit, some of the elites went to warn her. Not sure how I could have prevented that, and now Ixia knows we're coming. I mean, she probably already knew, but I'm not happy she has more exact intelligence. I think if we move quickly we can outpace any response. I already flipped her biggest piece to my side. Outwardly, Nathan displayed none of his concern. Now she's gathered all of our enemies together in one place. Very kind of her. He looked at the man. Thanks for the news, Turbang. Is she joining them? The man breathed out a sigh of relief as Kachai's magic healed his wounds, then replied. The gates were closed, but there are nearly 50 mages in the square. Thulio Dho Pelogi was in charge. None of Ixia's staff were present. Nathan's brows furrowed in thought. Okay, so the first people to show their face in the square are going to get evaporated. Any war mages? Turbang shook his head. I didn't see any red robes. Maybe 25 yellows, 15 greens, and 10 blues, a few pinks. So a lot of firepower, but not a lot of military discipline. I think we might have gotten all of the war mages with the response team. Nathan considered before speaking. Seems like we need to fall back on old-school Gemor tactics. Ambush and guile. He looked back at the 5 members of Lycast's squad, the Oath of Chilin, one of whom was a mage. Lycast is your mage from the Tower of Trickery. Can he do good illusions? The mage in question spoke up with a sniff. He has a name. I am Ian Sarha. Illusions. Go teach a mage to light a fire. I was tutored personally by Gale Shullett. So was I, Stalker Dick, William retorted, beak clacking with his equivalent of a giggle. Nathan waved his hands to catch Ian's attention and prevent the 2 mages from sniping at one another. Great. That's exactly what we need. We're going to split up into 3 groups. He held up one finger, noticing that more and more people were paying attention to them. Ian will come with me in Group 1, along with most of the people with ranged weapons. I'm going to charge into the square alone, and Ian will make it look like there are more people with me to help draw attention. I'll go in, draw the first barrage, and bust a hole in whatever barriers they have. The rest of my group will stay back and support me from range. William will be with Group 2, and Netta with Group 3, he continued, holding up 2 more fingers. He nodded to the young nulled mage from the old hands. Your groups will come in from the sides of the square, and you'll need to use illusions to let the fighters get among them so they can't just barrage us with fireballs. I'll try to make as much confusion as I can, keeping them focused on me. Coordinate with message. A deep laugh boomed out of Valhalla. As your flame calls, not the worst plan I've set targets on. I'll lead Team 2. Survive and thrive, Nathan Lark. Netta is on Team 3, I'll lead there, Delric said shortly. Nathan turned to Olad. Ranged elites in 1, split the rest of the elites up between groups 2 and 3. We need people who know the city in each group. Can you work with adventurers? The big man snorted, tapping his gauntlets together lightly. Even as we fought them, we knew they wanted us free or dead. Fighting our prior masters at their side is a wish from the giant. The adventurers didn't hold to strict discipline, but they listened when orders were given. It took about 2 minutes to split up into the 3 groups, and about as long for Nathan to ensure that nobody was still tagged by the detection enchantment. Wouldn't do for them to know we've split up. The last ping happened just recently and we're only a few minutes from the square. There isn't a good solution here. The only members of the heirs to join Nathan's Group 1 were Sarah and Stella, while Egal went with Arl and Katja into Valhalla's Group 2, and the melee fighters of the Oath of Chalin joined Delric's Group 3. Nathan gave one last glance around for Phelan, but she was nowhere to be seen. She'll either show up if she's needed or she won't. This isn't really her type of fight. She got us this far, and I bet she's taking advantage of the chaos in one way or another. The groups headed out with one last exchange of salutes. It was a quick dash through empty streets before the bow-wielding elite guiding them held out a hand. He indicated the intersection ahead, where another crossroad was sandwiched between 2 townhouses. Main square there, about 100 feet down to the right. Nathan nodded seriously, then looked toward Lycast. Get people in position, sneaky as you can. Then he turned toward Stella. Are the other groups in position yet? She shook her head. Not quite yet, they're almost there. William's group ran into some trouble, a few minutes until they're ready. I'd prefer we were attacking immediately. We want to foster confusion and get them focused on the wrong thing, and if the detection enchantments fire again, that could ruin the whole plan. Some trouble? He asked, voice tense. Stella shrugged. He didn't say. They watched for a few minutes as Lycast gave instructions to scout out the abandoned townhouses, so they could be used as firing positions. He was careful to keep people out of sight of the square, and had Ian cast illusions to help hide fighters as they snuck to the opposite side of the street and into other buildings. As time passed, Nathan had to prevent himself from asking Stella for updates every 30 seconds. He double-checked that his focus was full and had Stella cast a few spells to top off his stamina. Shit, William is with Egal, Arl, and Katja. What could be holding them up? I need to be patient. They'll be ready when they're ready. But what if they're in trouble and need help, or won't be ready in time? Maybe we do need to ask for an update. Give it another minute. He tensed and untensed, ready to sprint either direction at a word from Stella. Then he took a deep breath and calmed down. I'm not doing this on my own. I'm the linchpin of the plan, but definitely not the only part of it. I need to think things through, coordinate with people like Ian. He looked over at the illusionist, who was glaring at Nathan's shadow as if it was confusing him. Hey, Ian, this illusion, you'll need to keep it away from me, or I'll disrupt it. They might not know there are Gemor adventurers in the city, so if you can make it look like I'm charging with a bunch of the Giants' Rest elites, that might give us another edge. The man frowned, his bombastic demeanor fading to one of focus. You don't need cover, that's a lot of mages. Nope, I'll be fine. Any magic that gets close to me stops working. Ian sucked in a breath and shot a disbelieving glance at Stella, who smirked and nodded back at him. That's never going to get old. Magic is a trump card for so much on Davrar, and being immune is one heck of a joker. To keep his impatience under control, Nathan went over what his plan once he got into the square. The Gemor adventuring classes taught us that Giants' Rest will try to set up a large spell-permeable force barrier for a mage-heavy force like this. I charge in, hopefully get every single mage casting at me, break the barrier, then deal with the mages inside. Start killing them one by one. Nathan frowned. The slow part of that is actually killing them. I can move quickly and punch, but it still takes time for each one. But my aura is separate from my fists. Sarah stood nearby, the headshot gunslinger ready to jump onto a roof when it was time to go. Nathan ambled over. I'm thinking my aura will be able to reach more mages than my fists will. If you see me pass close to a mage but not strike them, I've probably taken away their mage armor. She considered his words, then nodded. Thanks, I may be able to see it happen with my skills. Don't go back for any of them or we may hit you by accident. I'll go as luck go with you. She gestured around to the waiting adventurers. All this, our parents would be proud and terrified. She smirked, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. Lycast approached. The big orc was chewing on his lip nervously. We're ready. What delays this awaited bonfire? Nathan scrubbed hands through his hair, pushing down the jitters in his stomach. William's group ran into trouble. In another minute Stella will message him again to be sure they're still on track and we don't need to go without them. If the next pulse of the detection enchantment happens first, then we go. True aim. The big orc eyed Nathan. I've heard of you, but this plan is bold. You are the sole spark that lights it ablaze. Those who know you are confident that you will survive your charge. I'll pitch in my torch because my risk isn't great, but I doubt that any could survive so brazenly challenging so many mages. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. Can you do it? Nathan held out a clenched fist. Yes. He was about to follow with something suitably melodramatic when Stella interrupted. William said they ran into 4 mages trying to get to the square. 1 got off a fireball and 2 elites are dead. They could go now, but Kacha is still healing the wounded. They only need a few more minutes. Shit, we haven't even started. And the mages in the square probably heard the fireball and are now aware there's something going on from that direction. The pulse of the detection enchantment washed over them and Nathan shook his head, glancing around one more time. The magic eddied strangely around an abandoned cart halfway down the street, and Nathan focused on the effect. There was a faint shimmer around the cart, like some kind of invisibility spellwork. Not a good time for shenanigans. High tier notice 9 achieved. Nathan focused harder on the cart, not trying to hide his interest. The shimmer of the spellwork started moving rapidly away, and Nathan caught a glimpse of a flapping black robe. A nail, one of the secret police mages, but only one and they're fleeing. There are too many variables here and we're out of time. That detection enchantment or that mage could blow the plan wide open. Either we abandon it or we go. Nathan made his decision. We're out of time, I'm going now. He gave Stella one more look. For your spells, shock and awe, watch your back, there's a nail creeping around. She was already casting message to alert the other teams. Rains of lightning to raise the past, and a shield worthy of a fortress foundry. Nathan waited for her to give him one more nod. They're ready. He got another from Ian and then he was off, rage kindling in his gut. He came around the corner already at a sprint, accelerating further as he dashed down the street towards the square and the mages in its center. The place was a wide expanse of cobbled stone, with fancy statues arrayed along the edges and a stage in the center. The far side of the square was a gatehouse built into the imposing wall that surrounded Exia's mansion. As Nathan ran, he spent some focus on one of his newer utility skills, trying to make himself look as big and threatening as possible. Just playing into the role they expect. The elites called me Mage Breaker, time to live up that title. Mid-tier noticeability 5 achieved. From behind him came the pounding of feet and a series of yells, but Nathan didn't look back. He hoped Ian's illusion was convincing. The Giant's Rest mages seemed to think so. They were a riot of brightly colored robes clustered around the large stage in the center of the square, and several of them were pointing at Nathan and yelling. He could very faintly hear one voice rise above the others. The blast was a distraction. They're attacking from this way. A rippling dome of energy enveloped the group, and magic started to fly in Nathan's direction. This wasn't just a few offensive spells, it was a barrage. There were a dozen fireballs, several spikes of ice, a few force blades, and more. Several of the spells interfered with one another, and about half of them were aimed at the illusion behind Nathan. But ahead of the main body of the volley came 3 bolts of lightning and 2 disintegrate beams. There's some damn dangerous mages over there. He didn't use focus to dodge any of the early spells, merely letting them melt into his anti-magic and boost his stamina far beyond its cap. Before the main body of the barrage hit, Nathan jumped into the air and held himself aloft with slow fall, letting the spells detonate beneath him. His legs and back were pelted with gravel as the square beneath him was pulverized by the wave of offensive magic. But Nathan was mostly unharmed, his enhanced toughness protecting him from the stone shrapnel as a cloud of smoke billowed outwards from the interaction of so many destructive spells. Nathan landed lightly on the edge of the cratered stone, feet pushing off of the uneven terrain to leap to solid ground and continue his charge. He emerged from the cloud at a sprint. The mages in front of him drew back as one, both terrified and affronted that somebody had emerged unfazed from the magic they'd unleashed. More spells flew at him, this time in a steady flow instead of a single volley. High-tier sprinting 5 achieved. The cloud of smoke and dust billowed out to both sides, and Nathan was quite aware of the illusion and earth magic woven into the cloud that was encouraging its spread. Netta and William are using it to cover teams 2 and 3, but it's going to block the shots of my ranged backup. Should have thought of that. I'll just need to keep their attention on me, and Hop Stella thinks to blow away the dust after we get close. The tide of spells continued, and he only dodged the ones that would break up the surface he was running on. A maximized blast fireball blew a gigantic hole in the cobbles right in front of Nathan's feet, and he jumped into a smooth arc, flipping in midair to resume his run without interruption. High-tier tumbling 5 achieved. Nathan opened his mouth and yelled wordlessly as loudly as he could. He used stamina to boost his voice and encourage the vibration of his vocal cords with perfected body. The resulting roar hurt Nathan's ears and throat similarly as his vocal cords strained from the effort. Pending utility skill, mid-tier battle cry, you have intimidated foes with a loud yell mid-fight. Your cries will be more intimidating and more audible across the din of battle. Consider it later. He leapt at the double-layered shell of force magic that surrounded the stage. With his class and insights, it would have been trivial to punch a hole in the barrier and get inside. But Nathan needed to destroy the shield entirely. Otherwise, his allies would be trapped outside the shield, easy pickings to any mages that weren't focused on him. And they might figure out how to beat me if I don't have support. I don't want to bet that 1 out of 50 mages won't have some clever trick that could take me on. I'm not so arrogant to think I can win at 50 to 1. So instead of jumping up on the stage towards the flinching mages, Nathan stopped and spread his hands wide. He burrowed his perception and aura into the geometric structure of the force bubble that wrapped around the mages. It was a work of art, a carefully crafted architectural marvel of reinforced panes and struts of force mana. In a flash of insight, Nathan mapped out the spell and saw a glimpse of how the shock of a physical impact would ripple through the entire structure and be bounced back to counter the force. Mana flowed freely through the support structure and would redirect to repair any damage. Beyond that, it was tuned to allow the free passage of spells in one direction, like a trace of inverted anti-magic. Magical Perception 6 achieved. There's a deep insight in that spell, but I'm not here to study it, I'm here to tear it apart. Maybe I'll try to remember it later for Stella. Panic spells continued to shed from Nathan's skin as he stabbed tendrils of anti-magic through the outer panes of the shield into the geodesic struts below. Conjured icicles and large boulders left shallow gashes in Nathan's skin as his aura was extended away from his body. But then he turned the resonant nature of the spell against itself, and the entire dome shattered into loose mana. Nathan jerked, twitching nearly uncontrollably with one of the worst cases of stamina overcharge he'd ever felt. He clenched his fist to fight down the jitters and looked up to the stage, where several mages had gathered and drawn weapons to fight him hand-to-hand. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 14. The red square Nathan leapt upwards, towards the lip of the stage to engage the 5 yellow-robed mages who'd drawn enchanted weapons. But the amount of stamina coursing through his body caused him to overshoot. He was on track to fly entirely over them. That was, until he altered his trajectory to slam himself down at the man in the center. The mage had raised a long sword crackling with lightning, and it zapped out as soon as Nathan approached. The tendrils of magic danced above his skin without penetrating his aura, and Nathan's feet came down to drive the man to the ground with a shattered ribcage. Nathan lashed out one way with his fists, the other way with his aura. Mage armor, shattered before and behind as his fist impacted a metal shield, and dented the intricately carved surface, even as the enchanted object sought to suck him into an internal storage dimension. The outreaching tendrils of spatial mana broke, and then the object itself exploded. A ball of weapons and a few rotting corpses escaped the internal dimensional space, flying outward as they were found occupying too small a space. So that's what happens if I break a dimensional enchantment. I'm surprised it hasn't happened to me before. Nathan was shoved backwards by the old blades scraping over his skin. Most failed to penetrate, but a few drew shallow cuts. The mage holding the shield fared far worse without his mage armor. He was pincushioned by the expanding spray of old weapons. The woman behind Nathan, whose mage armor he'd broken, fell with a spray of blood as a bullet hit her in the head, and overpenetrated to ping off another mage's armor. The mace she'd been holding clattered to the ground, releasing a spray of prismatic sparks that transfigured the stone it struck into a swarm of ants. Right. Sarah can see through smoke. Handy skill for a sniper. Gravity flickered around Nathan as somebody tried something clever, but he reached out and crushed the unfinished spell before it could fling him into the air. Mages all around Nathan tried to encrickle, but he picked out the old yellow-robed man who'd cast the spell. The man exuded an air of calm and confidence even in the chaos, and his yell resonated out across the stage. You are mages of Giant's Rest. You know more than Fireball. Be creative. He reached up with his magic to wrestle with the streamer of lightning that arced from Stella towards the collection of mages. Even though the old man was distracted, the other mages heard and obeyed. They cast a dizzying array of spells to hinder and slow Nathan down. The stone in a 15-foot radius around him both softened and became slick with frost at the same time. His aura enforced a radius of normality around his feet, but then the air around him was drawn away, and the light of the sun intensified to something burning. Oh, this is getting weird, but none of it's actually slowing me down. Nathan lashed out with his anti-magic once more, cutting the mage armor from 2 more foes as he struck down another with his fists. He was trying to cut his way towards the old man, who continued to stall Stella's magical offensive. But then a wall of rock rose up to cut him off. Bullets flew behind Nathan, but his attention was on the gray-bearded mage who had become the de facto leader of the assorted Giant's Rest mages. The man's eyes blazed as Nathan jumped over the wall of stone, and his voice boomed forth once more. Use the stone of the stage. He cannot break what is not conjured by magic. The man abandoned a complicated counterspell directed at Stella, casting a much simpler spell as Nathan closed in. Stone shape. Shit. This is what I was afraid of. Nathan spread out his aura, preventing the stone directly below from rising up to entomb him, but he still saw the relief on the faces around him as the stone outside the radius of his aura rose up in a large dome that threatened to enclose him. He lashed out with spikes of antimagic to break the shaping spells, but there were dozens of individual wills shaping the conglomerate mass. Nathan leapt for the gap in the rapidly closing dome of rock. The flowing stone stopped moving as he grabbed onto the lip and vaulted through the opening. He looked down at the 50 Giants' Rest mages staring up at him and smiled. A column of lightning smashed into the center of the mages as Stella's magic broke through the last of the interfering magic. Many of the mages staggered, though only a few mage armor spells in the epicenter broke, their casters falling as smoking corpses. Next, the concealing cloud of smoke and dust was swept away by a wind spell, finally allowing the bulk of Nathan's ranged support to come to bear. Arrows, bolts, and bullets cracked into the mages, though most only flinched as the projectiles bounced off of shells of force. A few more with cracked mage armor went down in sprays of blood. Then 30 fighters finally finished closing the distance and slammed into the mages from both sides with a long-suppressed roar of fury. Nathan reflected that the mage armor of Giant's Rest was an incredible spell. It required sacrifice, deep insights of magic and force ingrained into the basic way that somebody cast spells. But the resulting spell produced a series of tough yet invisible panes of magic suspended a few inches above the caster's skin that provided a durability equaled only by enchanted plate armor. But that protection would fail if battered hard enough, exposing the unarmored flesh beneath. More than a dozen mages fell prey to that fate as the freed elites cut into them, with the adventurers charging in only a second behind. Several other mages were bowled over despite their mage armor holding firm, but the old artisan mage cast a spell, and they were grabbed by pincers of force, dragged away from the advancing adventurers and into safety. Another spell established a semicircular perimeter of waist-high stone braced against the dome of rock. They tried to trap Nathan in. The mages rallied in the defensive position, blasting back melee fighters with bursts of wind or paralyzing them with mental spells. They weren't fighting so much as trading blows, but the mages could take a hit and the adventurers couldn't. Somebody bent aside another column of lightning from Stella, and several spells were hurled towards the ranged fighters. They were stabilizing. Even after being attacked from so many directions, the stern command of the elderly mage and sheer power of even simple spells was holding the Giants' Rest mages together. But they forgot about me. Nathan landed in the center of the formation, feet crushing stone. He'd been aiming for the yellow-robed man, but the old artisan mage had seen him coming and blinked away to the edge of the protected space. Focus allowed Nathan to lash out precisely with his anti-magic, stripping mage armor, and breaking shields of force from the mages around him as he ran after his quarry. He slammed aside a blue-robed figure who got in his way, barely feeling the impact. Those he ran into were either cut down by ranged fire or hastily recast mage armor. The yellow-robed mage glared at Nathan with suppressed fury and disgust. "Give me your best shot. I'm going to walk through it and crush your skull." Instead, the man turned and ran his eye rapidly over the fighting happening along the barricade, where adventurers and elites dodged magical blasts or struggled against paralysis spells. They struck back with blows that occasionally cracked mage armor. It was a show of power versus skill, and the artisan zeroed in on one of the greatest displays of skill. Delric Ernesto dodged past a spray of ice and shook off a stun to roll over the barrier and knock over the enslavement mage on the other side. The yellow-robed mage held out his hands and brought them together quickly, slamming his palms together before Nathan could reach him. Crushing force, the powerful spell grabbed Delric like a vice. His blackened armor flickered once in an attempt to hold off the crushing force mana before it failed. In a fraction of a second, The experienced team leader was crushed into a space too small to allow life. Quick as lightning, the older mage turned towards his next target and drew his hands apart once more. Nathan urged every piece of acceleration possible out of his every step, but time slowed down beyond what focus allowed as he followed the man's eyes to his next target. Koch wasn't breaching the line, but he was contributing more to the offensive than any other single adventurer. Flares of golden light broke mental spells and dazzled mages even as he snapped off healing where needed. His constant glow attracted the eye, and many mages sent spells at him, often ignoring the adventurers who were closer or more threatening. But Kachai's glowing shield shed fireballs and blasts of ice like water off a roof. But the same wasn't true of crushing force. The spell seemed to squash in from every direction at once, and the glow coming from the divine Justicar flickered. "My divinity is greater than your magic." Holy light shone forth brighter than before, and the yellow-robed mage blinked in surprise as his spell broke. High-tier sprinting 6 achieved. Then Nathan cannonballed into the gray-bearded man. They both went flying into the backs of the line of mages in a sprawl of limbs. A series of quick strikes meant Nathan was the only one to emerge from the pile, and elites were already swarming through the hole in the defenses. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 44. You have slain the master artisan mage Thulio Dho Pelogi. Nathan leapt to his feet, seeing that the mages were crumbling with their line broken, and without the supporting spells of the mages inside the perimeter. Stella had ceased fire, not wanting to risk hitting her allies with a pillar of lightning. The mages were beset from both sides, and Nathan ran down the line, breaking mage armor with a line of outstretched aura. Several mages seemed to try and surrender, but the elites cut them down without question. The adventurers were similarly merciless. It's hard to keep a mage with mental magic captive. I'm not surprised they don't try. A figure visible to Nathan as a shimmering outline cut down the last 3 mages in 2 elegant motions before Arl flickered into visibility. He stood over the last 3 bodies in his futuristic-looking armor, then looked up at everybody else and raised his sword high. Olad was the first to shout, "Victory! Freedom!" He lifted bloodied fists to the sky, and everybody in the square joined in for a long shout of exhilaration. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 180. You and your allies have defeated the gathered mages of Houseman. Even as the cheer continued, Nathan found himself scanning the group of his allies, counting. The stone of the stage was mauled by spellcasting and slick with blood from both sides. Bodies were strewn about, and not all of them were dressed in the robes of the Ascendant Academy. There are 12 missing. We started this with 37. I count 25 still standing, but all of the heirs are okay. Kachai was bent over, golden light shining from his eyes and hands as he slowly lifted up one of the adventurers. The woman wore the blackened breastplate of the old hands, and it looked like she'd caught a fireball on her shield. Her arm had been blown off, and the metal of her armor had been cracked and driven into her torso. The golden light from Kachai's hands soaked into her skin, and the metal receded from her wounds. Her breathing eased as ribs audibly shifted, and the arm grew back to the elbow, though no farther. He's come a long way. I remember when he still had to align bones before healing. Nathan shook himself, looking around quickly for others he might be able to help, but the other adventurers were ahead of him. Vihala helped a young slave elite reset his leg before feeding him a healing potion. It was Turbang, the elite who'd warned them about the mages gathered in the square. Some of the members of the Oath of Chalin were sorting through the other bodies to see if any of them could be saved by healing. A few times one of them called for Kachai, but only a few. Magic could be lethal, and when the mages had realized they were going to be overwhelmed, many of them had decided to ensure they brought somebody with them. Nathan pulled himself away from watching the magical healing. He couldn't do anything to help. He had a great deal of experience healing himself, but perfected body was personal and couldn't be extended to somebody else. Instead, he studied the gatehouse that dominated one side of the square. It led to Xia's mansion and probably the last holdout of mages that could contest the city. Nobody stood atop the gatehouse, and the wall didn't have a walkway on top of it, but they have to be watching. Now would be a good time for them to attack while we regroup. Sarah came up beside him, joining him in studying the edifice. One more barrier. He nodded his acknowledgement but didn't take his eyes off the building. Something moved faintly behind one of the arrow slits, and Nathan pointed at it. Second from the left, movement. Sarah's pistols cracked, sending bullets into the opening before Nathan had even finished speaking. All of the adventurers looked over, but after there was no response, they continued about their tasks. "Any notification for a kill?" Nathan asked Sarah. She shook her head as more adventurers came to join the group watching the gate. Stella arrived, glaring at the gatehouse. "Next time I'm fighting from closer." The mana was easy for them to slap aside because of the distance. Vihala and Lycast came to stand next to Nathan. The big orc looked around curiously. "Where's Delric?" Nathan sighed. "Dead." One of the artisan mages, crushing force. "I got him." Vihala winced. "Spells of the giant, all of your skill and preparation, and a single mage can snuff your flame with a word." They regarded the obviously enchanted gate for a moment before Nathan spoke aloud. "I could probably just walk up and open it, then I'll go for Xia. I'll need support after. She'll have at least a couple of elites." "That's an easy target for our foes, they'll expect it." Lycast gauged the gate. "It is likely barred and spelled, and if we knock first, who knows what spells will be in the air. It would be better to blast our way in together. You disrupt their magical response, then we all strike before they set up another." "Climb over," Vihala said. "Might take them by surprise. The side that strikes is the side that wins." Nathan shook his head, extending his aura and magical senses to be sure nobody was magically eavesdropping on them. "I can't disenchant the entire wall, and I bet the spells to prevent climbing are lethal. I could go over, but it would be just me. I don't think I can take whatever's in there all on my own. We should go through the gatehouse. Maybe I break the magic and then we blow it open with a spell." He gestured to Stella. Lycast glanced over and chewed on his lip. "Then you're in the way of the spell, and we gotta keep the gate clear." "I'd prefer the Caxall kid aim at blocking the worst of the magic thrown our way on the other end of the gate. Arthur could knock down that gate if it weren't spelled." Vihala gestured to the big tree-born. "He's got the skills. Want to knock down the innermost gate of Howlsmith." The big elk centaur's eyes danced with amusement as he surveyed Nathan. "My hooves will dance to this path. There is no worthier cause." He said the same thing to me after they found me outside Tial's tower, to convince me to fight back. Nathan spent a second reflecting on the crush he'd once had on Arthur. When he'd first come to Davrar, the well-muscled tree-born had ignited a strong attraction within him. He'd been lost and angry in those first days, and Arthur had taken the attention Nathan paid him and used it to focus Nathan on the fight against Giant's Rest. It was a bit manipulative, but he helped me find a purpose and make sense of my kidnapping. Really, Nathan had been attracted to a lot of people in the first few weeks. He had worried it was affecting his decision-making, but that had died down over time. I wonder why. Maybe exposure. People tend to be fit and attractive on Davrar. Maybe my bar has risen. More likely I was looking for somebody then as I was on Earth, but now I'm not. I've got other priorities, other paths where romance would be a distraction. He let the internal dialogue pass. For now, they needed to solve the issue of Xia's mansion. Nathan spoke to the assembling group. "Let's do it. The more time we wait, the more likely they strike first. Arthur and I charge the front gate and bust it open. I protect him from magic and will go for the mages inside to keep the gate clear. Then everybody else comes after. Stella's to provide shields and the trickery mages keep the enemy confused." There were nods all around, and Oled clanked his gauntlets together. "Then let's go." The Magebreaker kills the Archmage just as he took the last one, freedom or death. The last 3 words were delivered as a shout and taken up by the rest of the elites in the square. Well, it was unlikely we'd have complete surprise anyway. We can hope that our enemies are at least scared and may be running. I wonder if Exia's already teleported out. Arthur unlimbered his battering ram-sized staff and gestured for Nathan to go for the gate. His voice was barely audible under the shouting. "I'll strike after you do." Chapter 15. Death at the Gates. Nathan studied the enchanted gatehouse as the cheers of the freed elites rang in his ears. To his sides, the adventurers made final preparations. Egol tagged Arl with an invisibility. Sarah slipped an enchanted round into her rifle and drew it to her shoulder. I bet Exia's begging the other archmages to help right now. If we wait, that only gives her more time to succeed. They're probably hesitant because Tial's dead. They don't know what killed him and don't want to teleport into an uncertain situation. But Badad could mess everything up. Hopefully he's busy. And with that thought in mind, Nathan charged the last gate of Housemen. It was a single slab of metal engraved with arcane symbols, and he stretched out his magical perception to find a truly forbidding working of protection and denial laid into the material. This door wasn't made by Giant's Rest. I think it was stolen from a Kali's Conclave dungeon. It's got the same immaculate mana flow as the rest of their enchantments, but clearly not integrated well into the surrounding structure. As Nathan ran, he used all of his mental enhancements to map out the Giant's Rest-produced enchantments surrounding the gate and how they interacted with it. It was like somebody had used hot glue to attach a railgun to a galleon. The Giant's Rest spellwork was using a tiny fraction of the door's capabilities, mostly telling it when to open and when to blast the person who approached it without the proper permissions. Based on the spatial mana in there, it wouldn't surprise me if the door could be hooked up to a teleportation network of some kind, but Giant's Rest is just relying on its indestructibility and ability to super disintegrate whoever they tell it to. I bet Exia's expecting that to happen to me. Normally it would be easier to go through the wall than the door, but the weakest element of this link really is where the door connects to the rest of the wall. High tier Identify 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this utility skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to the next level. As it is high tier, the kind of insight will greatly affect how it develops. Instead of going for the door itself, Nathan leapt into the air, aiming for the keystone of the arch. That was where the enchantment on the gatehouse interfaced with the door, and that was what he would need to disable, so that the magical door stopped thinking it was part of an intact structure. At the apogee of his jump, Nathan slammed his elbow into the stone, using the momentum-based skills of implacable anti-mage to propel a spike of anti-magic deep into the enchantment, as the physical impact sent cracks running through the block of stone. As he fell, he bent tendrils of anti-magic around the door and ripped them through the jury-rigged hinges on the far side. He landed and put his shoulder against the gate, pushing hard. The magic of the ancient artifact buzzed uncomfortably next to Nathan's ear, but the portal didn't budge. "I think it's fastened with a physical bar." Then Arthur arrived. The heavy-hoofed charger was clad in enchanted armor and stood nearly 9 feet tall. His lower half was that of an elk, and together with his armor he had to weigh 1,000 pounds. All of the energy of his charge was delivered in the end of his enchanted staff, slamming into the gate like a horizontal pile driver. His blow struck the center of the gate, and the massive centaur man roared as he followed through on the blow with his body. The gate slammed backwards faster than simple physics would explain, the hinges and bolt torn from the wall by Arthur's tremendous blow. The slab of inviolable metal pinwheeled backwards, crashing and sparking against the stone plaza beyond. The big elk man's momentum carried him through the gatehouse and into the space beyond, where about 60 figures waited. In the center was an old woman propped up in a litter carried by 6 oiled and muscular young men. She was dressed in an elaborate tunic and was festooned with jewelry. Beady eyes fixed on Nathan and Arthur with peeved rage. That be Ixia. She looks like she wants to tell us exactly how we offended her, in great detail. To the sides of the Archmage were several more robe-clad graduates of the Ascendant Academy, a few enforcement and enslavement mages, along with 2 handsome entertainment mages. Spread out in an arc in front of her were at least 50 slaves. 4 of them were elites, 2 of whom weren't wearing helmets. The ones who pretended, whose loyalty lies with Giant's Rest. Another 20 were normal slave soldiers. The rest looked like household slaves, a dozen more young men gleaming with oil, as well as the cooks and cleaners and scribes of the household staff. More of them were clustered in the gardens beyond, clutching crossbows leveled at Nathan and Arthur. Nathan scrambled to keep up with Arthur, but the big elk man kept charging ahead. He followed the cartwheeling gate as it knocked aside everybody in its path, roaring as he went straight for Ixia. Shit, I thought we'd go in together so I could stretch my aura out in front of him. I didn't think he'd get ahead of me by busting through the gate and maintaining his speed. All I need to do is catch up while she's talking. Slow down, Arthur, calm your rage. One of the pink-robed mages cast a broad force shield that sparkled with an iridescent sheen. It stopped the bouncing slab of enchanted metal in its tracks, blocking Arthur. The Treeborn skidded on his hooves to avoid slamming into the barrier. Another mage gestured, shooting a potent bolt of ice to detonate Stella's fireball harmlessly overhead. Then an enchanted rifle bullet smashed through the prismatic barrier and tore into the mage armor, in front of Ixia's face, penetrating 3 layers of magical protection with a shower of iridescent sparks. At the last moment, one of the Archmage's earrings flashed and the bullet deflected. It tore past Ixia's head, grooving her cheek and tearing off a chunk of ear instead of landing between her eyes. The Archmage's mouth snapped shut as she felt at the bloody gouge. Her face mottled and her eyes bugged out as true rage overtook peevish annoyance. The spell that followed had no build-up, cast as casually as one would swear. Tripled empowered disintegrate, 3 familiar beams of magical power speared out from the Archmage's palm. One was aimed at Arthur, one was aimed at Nathan, and another was aimed over Nathan's shoulder, toward the gate and the adventurers beyond. The spells looked like any other cast of disintegrate, but to Nathan's magical senses they seemed sharper, like a scalpel reaching out to excise their targets from the world. Nathan was a dozen feet behind Arthur, catching up with every moment. In the split second to think afforded by focus, Nathan felt despair slice through him. He couldn't save the Treeborn. He might be able to stretch his aura that far, but he wasn't sure that it would be enough to block such a powerful spell. Even trying would also leave Nathan himself vulnerable, which he couldn't afford to do. To extend his aura that far, he would have to strip the protection from his own body, and Ixia would slaughter every single adventurer here without him. Nathan had to deal with her now, which meant he couldn't take a minute to regenerate a disintegrated torso. There was also the 3rd beam. Nathan couldn't see who it was aimed at, but it would kill whoever it hit. It's probably aimed at Sarah, who shot the bullet. Though that beam can probably kill more than one person. The justification swept through Nathan's focus-enhanced mind as he took action, stretching his aura up a few feet to catch the 3rd ray of sickly light even as the 2nd one hit him in the chest. The magic was powerful, and he staggered to a stop as he watched Arthur's form dissolving into thin dust before his eyes. Because I fucked up. Why did I let Arthur go through first? I didn't think this through. Of course he'd carry momentum through breaking the gate. I didn't think about how speed would impact the plan. Then he was raging and charged straight at the largest threat. If I'd been closer to him, I could have caught all of the magic. What a stupid thing to lead to Artha's death. The spell didn't relent, and it took Nathan's full attention to master the magic that sought to consume him. The beam of magic he'd caught with his aura sent out questing tendrils of destruction to destroy whatever had interfered, even as it crackled against his chest with an energy precisely tuned to annihilate covalent bonds. Disrupt the organization, absorb the raw power of the spell. I'm not matching power for power, I'm stealing it, taking it and using it to kill the bitch who killed Artha. Aura of Antimagic 5 achieved. Stamina poured into Nathan faster than he could spend it. His rage redoubled, then expanded again, chilling and growing vast. Battle meditation splintered and failed in the face of Nathan's grief and rage. I shouldn't have let him die. He was my first mentor, my first friend. I can avenge him. There were tears on Nathan's face as he resumed his charge towards the Archmage of Housemint. The slave elite stood in Nathan's way, but focus made it seem like they were moving in slow motion. His unchained rage let him move faster than ever before. He spent stamina in torrents, and it felt like he was moving through bullet time. He was unconsciously using slow fall to pull himself down with every movement, keeping himself in contact with the ground even as the forces exerted by each step should have launched him into the air. High-tier slow fall 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this talent. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight into this skill to develop it to the next level. As it is high tier, the kind of insight will greatly affect how it develops. The armored slave elites moved in coordination to cut Nathan down, but he dodged each of their attacks with graceful speed. He spun past the men, crushing the skull of one of those without a helmet and accepting a deep cut along one arm from the other. The wound foamed with poison before quickly closing. Serves the idiot right. Small-minded traitor. High-tier dodging footwork 9 achieved. The next obstacle was the iridescent wall of force, which Nathan shattered with a flick of aura. Beyond that was Exia and her litter, and the mages surrounding her. The Archmage's expression had shifted from anger to horror at Nathan's survival and implacable charge. Her mouth worked in slow motion, then shaped into familiar syllables as she raised a hand in front of her. Telling Nathan leapt at her, flying into the air as his aura speared out in front of him. It narrowed and thinned, smashing through layer after layer of magical defenses to make contact with the Archmage's outstretched palm. Port. Exia vanished from her chair, but not without leaving something behind. Nathan had disrupted the spell with the faintest touch of his antimagic, and her dismembered arm fell to the litter. The rings and bangles covering the limb clanked against the wood of the litter, a moment before Nathan landed on it, shattering the chair with a scream of rage. The fury enhanced Nathan's aura, making it into a hungry thing that almost had a mind of its own. It latched onto the mental magic of the slaves around him, and they staggered, dropping the remains of the litter as the controlling magic was dispelled. Nathan rose out of the shattered pile of wood and fabric. He glared at the mages who were nothing but targets. It felt like the weight of his glare should strike them dead. Not yet, but no more of my friends die to cleanse this filth. The crossbow-wielding slaves had finally started to react, and Nathan leapt and twirled through the air to dodge a volley of enchanted bolts. The seeking magics on the projectiles failed to lock onto him, and they weren't guided by skills. But there were a lot of them. Having a dozen crossbow bolts sticking out of me might slow me down enough for the mages to do more damage. Not going to happen. High-tier tumbling 6 achieved. The magic users in question were already backing up, but their eyes widened as he twisted in midair and landed before the group. A few threw spells towards him, but most turned and ran. No quarter. Nathan chased them, striking down the ones who stood and fought with single blows. He punched through chests, crushed necks, and cracked skulls. Then he moved on to those who ran. None of these mages could fly, and even those who used magic to accelerate themselves couldn't keep ahead of his grasping hands and the crushing blows that followed. High-tier sprinting 7 achieved. Then there were those who hid. Both pink-robed entertainment mages were quite adept at illusions, weaving themselves seamlessly into the shrubbery of the adjoining garden. It didn't fool Nathan at all. More bolts flew at him, but they were poorly aimed because the slaves shooting them clearly didn't have any practice, much less classes or skills around the weapons. He dodged through the fire effortlessly. An advanced student was the last. They'd cast invisibility and were trying to sneak into the large mansion when Nathan caught up and dashed their head against the building, leaving a splash of red across the stones. The spell faded to reveal a skinny young man, terror writ across what was left of his face. Nathan turned away, feeling grimly satisfied. He was painted in gore from his hands to his elbows, with more splashed across his face and chest. Heavy steps approached, and Nathan whirled, ready to fight again. But it was Olad who grimaced as he lashed out with a hand to deflect a crossbow bolt that zapped at him with streamers of lightning. He pointed a hand back towards the crowd. "Stretch out your hand, Magebreaker. Free these people." "Oh, right." Nathan shook himself, and his rage retreated, like a storm surge beginning its path back to the ocean. He reoriented towards the slaves scattered among the battlefield. The mages were all dead, and some of the slave soldiers were beginning to keel over from the failsafes that activated if they were about to be captured. Arl stood over the last of the enemy elites, who lay bisected on the ground. Across the plaza, freed elites were skirmishing with clusters of slaves, keeping them fighting without inflicting any real damage. The adventurers had picked up on the approach and had started to do the same. The mages of the Towers of Trickery cast illusions to confuse those with crossbows and make the battle seem like it was close, instead of already over. Everybody was delaying the end of the fighting so that Nathan could save people from the spells in their heads. Time to get to it. He circled the fighting, unraveling the magic even as it teetered on the edge of unleashing lethal spells on their carriers. It wasn't a challenging task. These mental spells were sophisticated in their control of the slaves, but the failsafes were no more than basic kill switches that would activate as their charges were being captured. As if the person who cast the spells didn't believe that their slaves could be freed, but the failsafe was a basic part of the spell, so they didn't bother taking it out. I got lucky. If this had been cast by somebody more paranoid, then a lot more of these people would already be dead. I guess they don't put the deluxe versions on dishwashers and maids. As he ran, Nathan's emotions roiled with the events of the last few minutes. Artha was dead, and it had been avoidable. If they'd taken more time to think through the approach, he would probably still be alive. But we were in a hurry. We wanted to prevent Exia from summoning reinforcements, from acting first. The recriminations and excuses whirled around in Nathan's head, along with the new revelations around his rage. I've been neutering the power of my rage with battlefield meditation. But without it, I will kill without thought. That's terrifying. Finally, he finished his circuit, laying his hand on the forehead of a matronly old woman with flour on her apron who had been clasping a crossbow with trembling arms. The weapon fell from her limp fingers and she collapsed to her knees, tears leaking down her face. Nathan looked around the plaza carpeted with dazed ex-slaves, seeing the occasional splash of red from where he'd slain their masters. He looked across the fabulous gardens to the mansion, more of a palace from which the Archmage Exia Dha Hummel had ruled Halsmet. We did it. The city's free, or at least mostly free. From here it's digging out holdouts, not fighting for supremacy. But Giant's Rest will try to take it back. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 50. You have badly wounded the Archmage Exia Dha Hummel, displaced her from her place of power, and killed many of her minions. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 193. You have defeated the last organized Giant's Rest resistance in the city of Housemint, slaying many mages in the process and driving off an archmage. While the freed elite stayed in the plaza, the adventurers sent off a flurry of messages and then stormed through the mansion. They were looking for any remaining mages and the controls for the city-wide enchantments. They found the building deserted. It looked like every single occupant had been suddenly called away, leaving the day-to-day objects of their professions behind. The kitchens still had fires burning in the hearths, and cleaning cloths were abandoned in the grand ballroom. Nathan followed the threads of the enchantments to the back of the building, where heavy doors guarded Exia's personal rooms. Inside were luxuries that wouldn't have been out of place in the richest homes on Earth, and more beyond that. The bathing area had an enormous enchanted hot tub that could have fit 20, as well as a bubble of water suspended in zero gravity. Beyond all of that was yet another layer of magical protections, which guarded the bedroom and the nexus of magic that controlled the detection enchantments and more. With the heirs at his back, Nathan broke the magical locks and threw the doors wide open. He scanned the room inside, wary of stepping into the room lest he break magic that would help Gemor secure their new conquest. The space looked like a low-quality knockoff of the control room Nathan had seen underneath the Edrani Empire defensive outpost, with enchanted tables replete with dials and lights. The tables ringed an illusionary map of Housemint, with various glowing lights indicating the positions of people tracked by the detection enchantments. Most surprising was that Phelan was inside the room, crouched over a black-robed figure and in her familiar black-clad assassin guise. She looked up and gave them all a high-voltage smile. "Hear me, this has been a day beyond prophecy." Chapter 16, A City Falls. Nathan just blinked at Phelan for a moment. "How did you get in here?" More adventurers caught up to him and goggled at the elite adventurer. "This muck-grabber's asshole." She prodded the dead nail she was crouched over, a victorious smile on her face. "I saw him watching you. Almost killed him there, but decided to observe and only intervene if he did. He thought about it, but all his assassination tools are magical, and he wasn't stupid." She pulled out a wand and spun it between her fingers before it vanished into her robe. "Ah, here." A large gem glinted in the assassin's hand. She inspected it with a sultry smile before her gaze moved languidly back to Nathan. "Nails have long feuded with Exia, and he decided to sneak in here and purge the enchantments." She gestured towards a dark corner of the room where a hidden door stood open. "I knew there was a hidden passage into this place and would have traded a grand insight for the secret, but the nail knew it and he had this." She held up the iridescent gem, which glinted with countless colors. "This is a keystone for the Housemint enchantments. It will unlock the magic which would normally be keyed to Exia's hands." She walked around the magical control room to the master panel. In front of it was an incredibly overstuffed armchair, almost a throne of fluff. Phelan glanced over at Nathan. "I'd be filled with sadness if this chair is trapped. Can you?" He took a second to process her request, then stepped gingerly into the room, trying not to brush up against anything important. "I'm stuck somewhere between grief, vindication, and anxiety right now. I just want a good meal and to stare at a wall for a while. But Giant's Rest will be coming, and this city isn't fully reclaimed. There's so much to do." He scanned his perception through the chair, puzzling through the assortment of enchantments on the furniture. There's nothing in there to explode. A triggered shield of some kind, but otherwise it's just an automatically adjusting, temperature-controlled chair with a massage function. It probably took somebody a year to enchant that, just so Exia could sit in comfort at this table. Nathan suppressed a burst of rage that almost caused him to spontaneously destroy the enchantments. He consciously activated battlefield meditation for the first time since his unhinged rage. A clarity swept through him, pushing back the anxiety and stress as he waved Phelan toward the chair. "It's just a fancy chair. Save it for the actual bad guys, not their chairs. Phelan watched him with pursed lips and a frown on her face. Who died? Artha. Nathan met her eyes and the other adventurers shifted behind him. He broke down the gate and Exia disintegrated him. She closed her eyes and nodded deeply. A brave man and a worthy act, remember unto endings. Her eyes opened. Have you added another archmage to your tally of deeds? Fled. The voice was Kachai's as he stepped into the room. Even here he glowed with divine light, and he eyed Phelan with a small level of suspicion. What is your intent for that stone? She sat in the chair with evident satisfaction before slotting the gem into a central slot on the enchanted panel. The entire room thrummed quietly as the enchantment switched from standby to active, and the dials all around the room lit up. The assassin reached out to manipulate the controls hesitantly. They had labels, but they were clearly intended for somebody familiar with the system. Nathan, meanwhile, was busy absorbing every scrap of information he could about the control center through his magical senses. It was like the center of the spider web, the place where the signals from all the enchantments across the city came together. He traced the incoming magic, feeling for meaning behind the interplay of mana. Stella dragged Egal into the room, looking around in wonder. How does this place work? Nathan was the one to answer. It's based on the Edrani Empire system. The consoles don't just look similar, the whole design is copied over, but shittier. He closed his eyes, not needing to see the changing displays. He could sense the magic inside of them flowing back and forth. This is like understanding a pretty awful logic circuit. It would take forever to parse it all, but I can see the state of every node and the setting on every gate. Stop! He pointed at Phelan's hand, frozen from where it was twisting a dial. You were about to overload the power of the detection enchantment. It would burn out in only 1 or 2 pulses on that setting. He couldn't see her face, but he heard the annoyance in her voice. Then how do I change the settings? I wanted to display any Giant's Rest mages still in the city. Egal moved towards a specific console along the wall. This one controls the targeting. I've seen things like this before, but nothing this complicated. Nathan traced the lines of magic that flowed in and out of the indicated portion of the enchantment. He furrowed his brow. Yeah, that's it. And then, what does the rest of this do? Stella was walking around the room in a semicircle. There's so much magic. Information flowed through Nathan, and he burned through his last few scraps of focus to hold it all in his head. He remembered everything he'd felt in the control system underneath the Edrani Empire outpost. He hadn't had the same level of magical perception or understanding then, but he'd stuck his hand through the most important piece of it. Power was flowing away from the center of the room, and information flowed back to populate the large illusion that displayed a map of Halsmith. Nathan frowned, realizing what was missing. In the Edrani Empire outpost, there'd been a big magical crystal which wasn't present here. Then he figured out what was going on. This entire thing, it's powered by a crystal stuck in a dimensional space anchored under the illusion. That button would blow it up. He pointed to a small and unobtrusive orange button near Phelan's elbow. This entire console is for power distribution, not overall control. Nathan's focus ran over the memories of all the times in the past few days he'd interacted with different parts of the city-wide enchantments. They all worked slightly differently, and he could sense the connections that converged on this room, threading through individual consoles towards the central node. Each had a different flavor and focus. High-tier enhanced memory 10 achieved. Congratulations, you have maxed out this utility skill. It cannot be improved any further. You must achieve insight to develop it to the next level. As it is high-tier, the kind of insight will greatly affect how it develops. His focus ran out entirely, but Nathan was pretty sure he'd figured everything out. Eyes still closed, he pointed to the different consoles around the wall in turn. That's the inner wall security grid. The next one is for the outer wall, and the one next to it can spend mana to reinforce or even rebuild different portions of the walls. This one regulates spatial spells inside the city. I think the inactive one over there can project a massively powerful force spell over the mansion, or a less powerful one over the inner city. The one by Egal is for controlling the detection grids. That one is some kind of announcement system, but it can also block messages in and out of the city if we routed enough mana. He opened his eyes to see everybody in the room staring at him, even as his understanding of the room settled. He still couldn't touch any of the consoles, but he was confident he could achieve any result that was needed from the room. Congratulations, you have developed the high-tier Identify utility skill into Magical Intuition. Utility skill, Magical Intuition, you will easily understand complex magic, even from incomplete evidence. This skill extends to spells, enchantments, and other magical effects, but not natural phenomena. Will enhance your understanding of mana types and spellwork. And Eldred dismissed enhanced memory when I asked him if he wanted it, but it was key to figuring this thing out and letting me develop Identify. Magical Intuition has lost some breadth. It doesn't apply to non-magical things anymore. That's a bit of a loss, but magic is where I need the help. I've spent 2 decades understanding the physical world, but only half a year on the thaumaturgical one. Stella had moved over to the spatial console. How do I stop teleport from working? Nathan coached her through the process, though it involved a certain amount of trial and error. Phelan obeyed with amusement, refusing to give up Exia's control couch. In short order, they blocked teleport spells within the city. Then Stella and the other mages spent a moment sending and receiving last-minute messages before they blocked those off as well. Finally, they reversed the detection enchantment so it would latch onto anybody bearing a mage mark. Phelan looked down at the map of Housemont, marked with every surviving mage of Giant's Rest still inside. They were scattered around the inner city, cut off from each other and leaderless. She looked up from the map, and her bared teeth were a promise of bloodshed. Time to hunt. They quickly organized into teams to chase down the remaining mages. The adventurers and freed elites allowed themselves to be tagged by the detection enchantment so they would show up on the map. Vihala took charge of the control room, using some volunteers from the household staff as runners to keep everybody in touch. Before Nathan left, she waved him over. The dark-skinned woman's face was hard, and she didn't speak for a second, as if hesitating. Nathan spoke first. "I'm sorry about Artha, I couldn't," he trailed off, his throat growing tight. "I would trade a grand insight that he be the last of my comrades to fall." Vihala's words were careful, even though her tone was bitter as she studied the holographic map of the city. "Remember till endings and hold what his death has gained. We are isolated, and if those mages group together they could challenge us. Kill more adventurers, kill those who could be freed." The middle-aged woman tossed her head, the beads in her dreadlocks clicking as she fixed Nathan with a steely gaze. "I have heard of Harthai. You have captured the mages of Giant's Rest before." He nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Do not do so now. We are too few in number, and I would not invite a soul eater into our village. Kill them and move on. We will attempt to free as many slaves as we can, but we will not try to save the mages. By our blood, Housemont belongs to Giant's Rest no longer, and I will follow that light above all others." Phelan stepped out of the shadows to the side. "Every mage that escapes is one more voice that will argue to retake this city their home." Nathan agreed. His rage still boiled under the surface, and he smiled as he imagined killing those who had held power in this city. These are the consequences coming home to roost for Giant's Rest, consequences for how they ruled, how they treated their slaves. This was never going to be a clean fight. If we want to truly challenge Giant's Rest, I can't be squeamish about this. Vihala gave him instructions on his first target, where two mages were huddled on the second floor of a building, only a few streets from the main square. She was sending other groups after slave masters or isolated mages, with instructions to avoid challenging slave soldiers until Nathan was present to break their collars. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 55. You have killed Huel Dho Wait and Sifri Dha Wait by taking them by surprise. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 196. You have slain two enslavement mages of Giant's Rest. The messenger system Vihala was using was much less convenient than the message spell, but the inconvenience was far worse for their enemies. Nathan's next target was hiding in a closet, his panicked breathing making it easy to track him down even if Nathan hadn't been able to feel his mana from 2 rooms away. He was trying to cast Message every 30 seconds, whimpering in fear each time the spell failed. The slaves in that house bore the marks of a violent temper, and Nathan felt no guilt about the next set of levels. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 58. You have killed Dho Idem as he cowered in fear. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 198. You have slain an artisan mage of Giant's Rest. As Nathan left, he passed a few of the ex-slaves from Xia's mansion. They bowed their heads and gave him Giant's Rest-style salutes. Once he passed, they entered the house and spoke calming words to the newly freed slaves within, who were in various states of emotional breakdown now that the magic binding them had been broken. Good. I was a little bit worried about what would happen now. They've always had the mages as masters, and now that they're gone I was concerned about anarchy. But there's still organization, and it's one that values kindness. He joined back up with the heirs and some freed elites for the next target. Several mages were assembling in one of the squares in front of the mansion on the 3rd hill. They'd assembled a force of slave soldiers and slave masters, and were trying to decide if they should retake the control room or flee the city when the heirs found them. Nathan turned the corner and caught the first fireball, which guttered and died in his hand. That simple action spread fear among the half-dozen mages ahead of him. The fear turned to outright panic after Sarah harvested the slave masters with a rapid volley of pistol fire from a nearby rooftop. Then, Stella focused a viciously powerful light spell on the leading mage, rapidly cycling the color of the spell until his mage armor shattered. The man screamed as his flesh reddened and his clothes burst into flames. The mages broke and ran. "Did you have to make it so bright?" Sarah yelled down, trying to blink away the spots as she aimed. She still managed to clip one of the retreating mages with her rifle, the heavy bullet making the woman stagger and fall even through her mage armor. Stella yelled back, "If I never use my light spells in combat, I'll never develop them." "Oh, I can probably develop slow fall to airwalking now. Kia gave me the insight for that. But she also said that it was best done in combat. The bar is lower for talents when you're in a fight. What we're doing now doesn't count. I'll wait until I get into an actual fight." Arl and Nathan chased down the remaining mages. Kachai didn't join them, merely holding off the slave soldiers until Nathan could return and free them of their collars. Nathan could feel the cleric's heavy gaze as he stomped on the fallen woman's skull, but the wolfman didn't say anything to interrupt. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 62. You have slain Benrir Dho Moha and Jachai Dha Moha, and exterminated a minor house of Giant's Rest. Implacable Antimage has leveled to 202. You and your team have killed a group of mages and freed their slaves. Nathan bid the heirs goodbye, since they were needed in different places. His friends were being sent after any mages in the streets, since the combination of Stella's spells and Sarah's rifle allowed them to quickly and easily dispatch their foes without much danger. As the only other complete adventuring team left in the city, the Oath of Chalin was hunting down slave masters and the occasional weak mage. Phaline was semi-independently going after isolated mages, and small groups of freed elites were scouting and attacking opportunistically. Meanwhile, Nathan was the answer to a dozen different problems. He was directed to any large concentrations of slaves or particularly powerful mages, alternating between delivering freedom or death. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 65. You have slain a Cur Dho Jalb. Implacable Anti-Mage has leveled to 203. You have killed an enslavement mage of Giant's Rest. In the process, he sprinted back and forth over the city, often outrunning the messengers sent out with updates and further instructions. His knowledge of the city grew, and Nathan learned the shortcuts and streets of Housemint as he hunted his enemies through it. But with perfected body, he never ran out of breath, and he never had to slow down from strained muscles. High-tier sprinting 7 achieved. He freed hundreds of slaves, perfecting his abilities to break the myriad slavery enchantments of Giant's Rest without any danger, no matter how paranoid the enchanter. Magical Intuition 2 achieved. The reaction to freedom varied widely, but most of the slaves reacted with extreme emotion of one form or another. Sometimes it passed quickly, replaced by a grim determination or exhausted relief. Other times people seemed to slip into near catatonia. Nathan spared a few quick words for each group, affirming their freedom and challenging them to be responsible for themselves. Leadership 3 achieved, but he always moved on. There were more places he needed to be. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 67. You have slain Riched Dha Pelogi and Divris Dho Dadra. Implacable Anti-Mage has leveled to 204. You have killed an enslavement mage of Giant's Rest and their apprentice. The freed slaves spread like a tide in the cleared areas, occupying the richest of homes and caring for the people Nathan left behind. Some served as messengers or scouts for Vihala, and her hold over the city grew firmer. A few mages tried to use their slaves as hostages, proclaiming loudly that they'd kill all of them if anybody prevented them from leaving the city. Nathan snuck up on them, sometimes disguising himself as a slave, other times just avoiding their attention and dropping off a roof to snap their necks. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 70. You have slain Timon Dho Beltosk. Implacable Anti-Mage has leveled to 206. You have killed an artisan mage of Giant's Rest and saved their hostages. Mid-tier Noticeability 5 achieved. Low-tier Disguise 3 achieved. Low-tier Quiet Movement 4 achieved. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 72. You have slain Brill Dho Memsk. Implacable Anti-Mage has leveled to 208. You have killed an enforcement mage of Giant's Rest and saved their hostages. One mage disguised herself among the slaves. She was just one among many, headed towards the gates in a large crowd armed with tools of their trade. Nathan grabbed some clothing from a nearby house's laundry. Then he slipped into the crowd from an alley, ambling along like any one of the mind-controlled laborers around him. He worked his way through the crowd until his magical senses picked up on a mana pool, then slowly angled himself in that direction. It took a little while to work his way over to where the mage trudged, carrying a gardening tool and blending into the surrounding slaves surprisingly well. She wasn't actively using any magic and didn't even have mage armor active. The blow to the back of her neck killed her instantly. Mid-tier Noticeability 6 achieved. Low-tier Disguise 4 achieved. Assassin of Gemor has leveled to 76. You have slain Doha Dha in her as she was disguised in a crowd. Implacable Anti-Mage has leveled to 209. You have killed an entertainment mage of Giant's Rest. The next messenger waited for Nathan to break the collars of the group before telling him that no more mages remained on the map. Any graduates of the Ascendant Academy left in the city were few in number, and likely stuck in place by whatever was protecting them from the detection enchantment. Any attempt to reclaim the city would have to come from outside the walls because teleportation was disrupted, and they had posted watchers to give warning. But Nathan's job wasn't done. Many more slaves still needed to be freed, and several groups of slave soldiers were being contained until Nathan could get to them. He ran through the familiar streets, finding that the city had changed in fundamental ways. The first time he'd been to Housemint, it had been bustling with an oddly silent industry, as slaves went about the task of hauling and working without a single unnecessary word. After he'd killed Tial, the city had been in lockdown with the only traffic being soldiers and their masters. Now the primary sound was human voices, quiet and subdued to be sure. But Nathan heard a laugh come from a building and stopped, listening to the chatter from inside for a moment before he continued. That's why I do this. So people can be people, not automatons. But I'm not done until all of them are free. Not like that'll be the end of our problems. It's only a matter of time before Giantress tries to take the city back.